All right, I think the next slide is me. It's me. All right, good morning, everybody. If you guys want to come on stage, or yeah, get comfy. Welcome to the iconic Hearst Tower. Just a quick show of hands if I can see you. How many of you have been here before? Just a few. Okay, well, welcome. My name is Katie, and I'm the Senior Director of HearstLab, based here at Hearst HQ. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday morning. I know you've all had a very, very busy week. We're really excited to have you here. First, a little bit about us. Hearst is one of the oldest and largest diversified information services and media companies in the world. Many of you likely know Hearst for their magazine brands like Elle, Cosmo, Delish, Good Housekeeping, or its TV networks like A&E, ESPN, and History Channel. What most people don't know is that Hearst also includes global financial services leader Fitch Ratings, including Sustainable Fitch, as well as a range of B2B data and software solutions in the healthcare tech, transportation, and logistics industries. From sustainable TV programming, entertainment, and journalism, to maintaining thousands, yes, thousands of acres of forests and regenerative farming at our ranches, to Hearst Foundation, independently donating tens of millions of dollars to community programs, responsible environmental stewardship is an important part of the way Hearst does business. If you haven't already, you might have noticed on the screens outside the tower, there's an announcement about our Hearst Sustainability Report. I encourage you to check it out at hearst.com/sustainability. Furthermore, Hearst has a major footprint in real estate. This building is a great example, as well as venture investing. That's why I'm here. Today, only 2% of venture capital goes to women-led companies. HearstLab was founded specifically to close this gap. To date, we've invested nearly $100 million exclusively in women-led tech startups worldwide, including Scope Zero and PlanetFWD. And we're only just getting started. While I have you, I have to give a shameless plug to check out our LinkedIn to follow along for what's next, including upcoming 100K pitch competitions in Atlanta and London. Now, back to why you're here today. For this year's Climate Week, we could not resist the opportunity to bring together the amazing women and men from our network who are pioneering actionable Scope 3 solutions, especially designed for ESG and people leaders like you. Before we jump into the details, I'm going to turn it over to Lizzie, CEO and co-founder of Scope Zero, who has a master's degree from Stanford, so she's very, very well equipped to coach us on some of the basics of Scope 3 emissions. So Lizzie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. You'll hear more from me later. But just as a primer, before we dive into the main event, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page with understanding what Scope 3 emissions are. So when it comes to understanding emissions of a company, it's somewhat similar to financial accounting. So in financial accounting, a dollar is a dollar, but it's helpful to classify those dollars in different categories so you know how you're spending those dollars. And you know where they're going. Similarly, when a company reports on their carbon emissions, a carbon emission is a carbon emission, but it's helpful to separate them into different buckets so we know where they're coming from and how we can mitigate them. So for standard corporate carbon accounting procedures, we usually put carbon emissions into 3 main buckets, and they're called Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. Each of these buckets, a carbon emission is a carbon emission. One is not better or worse than the other. It's just for accounting purposes. So Scope 1 emissions, those are direct emissions. So let's say you're a restaurant and you have a natural gas stove. When you burn that natural gas, you're creating carbon emissions from burning that fuel. That would be a Scope 1 emission. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions that come from the energy or electricity usually that your building is using. So again, if you're a restaurant, you have light bulbs that are being powered from a coal plant down the road. That coal plant is burning coal, creating carbon emissions to light up your restaurant. So those would be your Scope 2 emissions. Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are usually the easiest to measure and the easiest to control. Scope 3 emissions is where the chaos happens because this is all the emissions throughout your value chain. There are 15 different categories of Scope 3 emissions. And if you're a restaurant, this can range from anything from the emissions that went into growing the food to transporting the food, the emissions that went into creating the plates and utensils, and it also includes the emissions of your employee commute. So commuting to work, or maybe you have a manager that works from home. That would technically fall within Scope 3 as well. And Scope 3 is usually the biggest category at a company. So I just pulled 3 publicly available reports from some well-known large companies. And as you can see, Scope 3 is well above 90% for all of these companies. And because it's such a big portion of carbon emissions for corporations, it makes it all the more important to have this discussion today about how any company can successfully and immediately reduce those emissions. So you'll hear more from me later. We're going to kick it off with this panel first, but I'll give it back to Katie here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lizzie. Oh, easy. Thanks, Lizzie. All right, let's rock and roll. So I'm going to introduce the moderator of our first panel. Lexi Sachs is the executive director of the Good Housekeeping Institute, also based here in Hearst HQ. She has over 15 years of experience in the consumer products industry and a degree in fiber science from Cornell University. Lexi serves as an expert source, both within Good Housekeeping for product testing and other media outlets regularly appearing on national TV. So keep an eye out. I cannot imagine a better person to kick us off with a discussion on how consumer companies are moving the needle on their climate goals. So Lexi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you all for being here. So as Lizzie was mentioning, upwards of 90% of these carbon emissions are coming from the supply chain for the average consumer company. And the trouble is that these are the most difficult and complex emissions to measure. So we are going to be hearing from some companies who are really making progress and breaking through this complexity to help us achieve some of these goals. So I'm going to ask both of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their company. So Julia, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. I'm Julia Collins. I'm the founder and CEO of PlanetFWD. We're really happy to be part of the HearstLab family. And we exist because we know that it's incredibly challenging for organizations of all sizes to accurately measure and then reduce and report on their greenhouse gas emissions. We also know that these companies are interested in understanding biodiversity impacts, land and land use change impacts, energy impacts, water impacts. And so PlanetFWD has built a technology platform that reduces the cost and the friction involved in doing very high quality assessment of organizations all the way down from their head office in their Scope 1 to a head of lettuce in Scope 3.
Nana.
Thanks, Lexi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anna Terrell. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Decathlon. Decathlon is the world's largest sporting goods retailer. We're present in over 72 markets around the world with a workforce of over 105,000 teammates. For American colleagues in the room, you may not have heard of Decathlon, and that's because the American market, sporting goods market, is tricky. But we'll go again. Before joining Decathlon, I spent the last kind of 8-9 years in the CPG and grocery retail industry, working in companies including Nestle and Tesco. And throughout my career, obviously decarbonization has been such an umbrella under which so much of my work and my team's work focuses. And Scope 3 emission reduction, as we've already heard, is by far and away the most challenging topic to get your arms around and to tackle, particularly as companies, multinational companies, but companies that are dependent on complex, interconnected global supply chains. So even if you're a company that is born, raised, and serving one market, let's take the US, you will still have dependencies outside of that country. And figuring that out And the way to engage with those complex supply chains is really very much part of the journey that we're on. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Thank you both so much. So Julia, we're going to start with you. Can you share some ways that PlanetFWD is helping consumer companies make progress in reducing Scope 3 emissions?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you saw from the data that was shared earlier that there really is no hope of achieving net zero if we don't really take control and take ownership over Scope 3 emissions. And although it is very much the case that some of these impacts are outside of the operational control of an organization, it is nonetheless the organization's responsibility to understand what is happening in the supply chain. But it's not easy. You know, there's a reason why everyone is tearing out their hair about Scope 3. These supply chains are dynamic, they're complex, they're large, they're multifaceted, and often organizations don't even have perfect transparency across primary, secondary, and tertiary suppliers. So PlanetFWD has designed a workflow to make all of that easier. In the first place, we make it easier for customers to understand how to convert their purchasing data into the correct emissions data. So we look across an organization at everything that organization is spending across the organization, and then we can map those expenditures in the same way that we talked a little bit about kind of accounting, traditional financial accounting being a good framework for carbon accounting. We create sort of like a chart of accounts for carbon, making sure that the correct expenditure matches to the correct category, subcategory, and then to the correct emissions factor. And smoothing that process really helps customers. The other thing that Anna teased was this idea of engaging across the value chain. And so PlanetFWD has a tool that makes it easier for companies to contact their upstream suppliers, to gather data from those upstream suppliers, and to make sure that the data that they're gathering informs their own decarbonization strategy. So really begins with understanding what the data is, how to ingest it seamlessly, and then making sure that you're engaging others who are really important participants in your decarbonization journey.
A follow-up question for you, because you mentioned a lot of different topics that we're going to dive into, but one of them is the obstacles and the challenges that the companies face when trying to measure this. So can you share about what you're seeing these companies facing as the challenges and how can they overcome them?
I mean, and Anna will have some really good context for this as well, particularly given the work that you did at Tesco. But one of the biggest challenges really is engaging your upstream suppliers. You know, these suppliers are incredibly busy making the goods and services that you're using in your products. And often when you make a request for data, this is a high friction point for them. You know, they're busy doing other things as opposed to replying to your sustainability survey. So PlanetFWD is working closely with organizations like the Climate Collaborative and Sensiba and some of the largest retailers, some of whom are in the room today in the United States, to make it easier for these upstream suppliers to share data. We're creating something called the Aligned Reporting Initiative. And if anyone in the room is interested in joining a working group or potentially even being part of a steering committee on this initiative, I would invite you to please contact me. I'm just Julia@PlanetFWD.com. We really want for our industry to be aligning around one set of questions to be able to ask suppliers so that we're not imposing so much burden on them.
Great, thank you so much. Anna, can you walk us through your decarbonization strategy and what you're focusing on?
Sure. How many hours do we have?
Briefly.
Yeah, I just want to also bounce off of Julia's comment because I really want to underscore the importance of this point. We often as businesses, we're pretty blinkered in our approach, right? We just think about us. We think about what our job is to get done. And increasingly, we're setting voluntary targets and net zero targets. And actually, more and more, we're seeing mandatory regulation coming in to support that as well. And we're focusing on the end goal, right? Whether it's as Decathlon or Nestle or whoever else. But to Julia's point, our supply chains, they don't think or work that way. So for every Decathlon or for every Tesco that is approaching them, asking for data, asking for information, demanding increasing expectations to decarbonize, there are dozens of other companies that are doing the same thing. And we're all asking for it in slightly different ways. So when you are one person responsible for driving all of the sustainability agenda within some of these big complex suppliers or even small SMEs, that's an incredible burden we're putting on the supply chain. And it's just not realistic for them to be able to manage. So the solutions that Julia is talking about are really fundamental for all of us to be able to get scalable, reliable, robust data information, but also move these complex global supply chains towards the future that we all want to see. So I just want to kind of reiterate that point because it's super, super important. In terms of Decathlon's sustainability journey and our decarbonization plan. So we have a net zero commitment that's been validated and science-based targets near term and long term that have been validated to be net zero by 2050 earlier if we can do it. We're in a moment right now where we're seeing a lot of companies that are wobbling a little bit around their climate commitments because of market dynamics, the geopolitical environments, and we are no different in terms of those externalities having a big impact. Supply chain crises, we're having deep problems in terms of how we can move product around the world. Lots of issues in shipping and things like that. The war in Ukraine that's having an impact. So it's a very real, very challenging moment, but the goal and the commitment doesn't change. So for us, it will always be the heavy lift to focus on how we decarbonize the supply chain and our Scope 3 emissions. There are different levers to doing that, but at least 85% of our global emissions are associated with the production of our products. Decathlon is a semi-integrated business. So we do design and conception in-house. We have a number of factories that we directly own, but the vast majority are third-party independents. And we sell through our stores, online increasingly. And then we have our whole network and web of shipping and logistics. So all of that has to be taken into account. But as we've also already heard, the biggest challenge to go after, as Julia said, is actually going as far back up those global supply chains as you can. Now, coming from food and bev, actually, it's much further ahead. You're increasingly seeing companies that can get to origin. They can certify ingredients and raw materials because they actually kind of need to. Because for all of us as consumers, we want to know what we're ingesting is good for us or it's sustainably produced. We want to know what it is, where it's made, and who's made it. But in other sectors, including sporting goods and apparel, they're a bit further behind. And so we are pushing ourselves to actually break those barriers down by engaging with our suppliers differently. I'm conscious of time, so I'll just leave on one point, but it's incredibly resource intensive for companies to engage the supply chain, because what we're doing is not just asking about information and data, but we're also educating, informing, and upskilling, because actually there's a big vacuum that we're all operating in. And Decathlon is no different from any other business in the world. We're not perfect. We haven't got all of the answers yet. And sure as hell, neither have our supply chains. So there's also a lot of work to do, a heavy lift there in terms of how we can bring people with us. And the power of information is transformative to enabling that. But there's more work to do.
Thank you so much. That was great. So taking off of what you said about the difference between like the food industry and the sporting good, I want to ask you, Julia, how do you see a difference between these different types of companies, these different categories, food, beauty, apparel, and so on? Are the challenges they're facing different?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of it all is that the life cycle assessment as a science, as a methodology, as a practice is applicable across all of these industries. And that's really good news. That means that we have an aligned point of view on how to measure the impact of products. What's different are the market dynamics that Anna talked about. You know, in fashion and apparel, for example, there are about 18 pieces of environmental regulation that fashion and apparel companies have to comply to. The DPP, the EUDR, the CSRD, it's an alphabet soup. In other industries, there are fewer. There also is sort of the competitive landscape and how much collaboration is happening. We've seen, thank goodness, recently in food, particularly in Europe and the UK and I being a leader, more collaboration on the part of food retailers in collecting and sharing data. And so each industry has a bit of its own nuances, but what I would say is that the solutions like PlanetFWD that are being deployed across industries are really in a unique position to continue to raise the bar, from one industry to the next. Universally, what companies need at this stage in the game, right? This is 2024. This is not phase one, right? Companies, by and large, 78% of the largest firms have already set a net zero commitment. So we're clear on that. We have set our baselines, we have set our targets. The name of the game now is emissions reduction. And this is why the work of engaging the supply chain is so important. Because if you're working with global average data and you don't really have a sense of what's happening, there's no way to actually go from setting a target to achieving that target. So whether you're a food company, an apparel company, a sporting goods company, a beauty company, a consumer electronics company, the name of the game now is really understanding what are your drivers and how to reduce them. And I'd say that is the same across all industries.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for touching on that. So Anna, you are in a very unique position as well because you are both a brand and a retailer at Decathlon. Can you share what retailers are asking of you and what you are asking of your suppliers?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And just super quick, again, just to riff off Julia's point, because it's really important. We're talking a lot about emissions and scope 3 here, but there is a huge interconnectivity of issues. So actually, for us as businesses, it's also about identifying the opportunities and the win-wins. Because, for example, land use change and deforestation, there is, as Julia said, there's regulation now coming in Europe that requires us to have deforestation-free supply chains. Now, if you can eliminate deforestation from those supply chains, you're also reducing your emissions footprint. And the same will go for a number of other different topics. So the imperative for having good data is really multifaceted. In terms of that kind of brand retailer dynamic, I guess for me, the key word is collaboration. And Julia's touched on it already. Hands up, we have completely shifted in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, from being in spaces where we were quite protectionist, I would say, as businesses, to really wanting to and understanding the imperative for pre-competitive collaboration. So, and I'm working in a company now that is almost, I was going to say naive, it sounds like a negative word, but it's incredibly open to open sourcing its methodologies, its approaches, and sharing with other competitors, including brands and retailers. We are an integrated brand and retailer, but about 80% of our product base is Decathlon owned versus third parties like ASICS and Puma and others. And there is probably still a little bit more work to do, particularly with the brands, because it tends to be that the brands have got bigger budgets and that they can move forward or lean into specific areas harder or quicker than retail. Retail, smaller margins, you're really covering a much wider base. If I think about when I was at Tesco, a grocery retailer, we had thousands of suppliers. We had thousands of SKUs that covered T-shirts to shampoo to broccoli. So completely diversified portfolio, whereas brands, they tend to be a little bit more focused. So there is a little bit of a challenge for us to figure out how can we pre-competitively collaborate and co-fund in a way that recognizes the positions that we sit within the value chain. But ultimately, there should be no argument about coming together to collaborate on data and information sharing. And that's what we're starting to see in the food industry. Julia's mentioned it in the UK, already happening, but it needs to happen more consistently elsewhere. And that means kind of not seeing this as competitive advantage, seeing this as really good for the planet.
That's amazing. I absolutely agree with you that collaboration is really key here. Julia, can you touch on how you're seeing collaboration play out with your customers?
Yeah. If we think about food, for example, one of the best interventions that you can make in a food supply chain is to source from farmers who are practicing organic and regenerative agriculture. We know that these farm systems sequester carbon, improve soil health and therefore human health, improve nutrient density, water infiltration, biodiversity. I mean, there's so many ecosystem services that are incredibly beneficial to all beings in a regenerative system. But the way that these regenerative systems needs to work is in rotations. A farmer will grow several crops in rotation to fix the nitrogen in the soil. Maybe you're growing burdock for pest control. Maybe you're following that with buckwheat. And one way that companies can collaborate is to find buyers for all of the crops that are produced in a regenerative system, not just to go and say, I'd like your organic and regenerative wheat, and sorry about the other rotations. I don't know how maybe you're going to sell those for animal feed. And so what I would love to see are more companies coming together and saying, all right, you're going to take the buckwheat, I'll take the millet, and really creating markets for these farmers that are doing this incredible work.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So Anna, Decathlon has been embedding sustainability throughout the entire organization from the product development phase, having initiatives to align leadership and employees. Can you share a little bit about this and the impact it's having on some of your goals?
Yeah, definitely. So 100% of what we call teammates, employees across Decathlon globally are incentivized, linked to our sustainability commitments, a range of different KPIs. 20% is linked to absolute emissions reduction. But we also have KPIs linked to increasing circular sales, so circular business models, and other areas such as living wage, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the starting point. 100%, everyone, including the executive team, we are assessed on that. In addition to that, our share price, we're a private company, we're a family-owned company, but we are independently assessed and assigned a share price value, which then delivers dividends to our shareholders. That share price methodology and calculation also includes ESG. In fact, it's a significant part of our share price valuation, and decarbonization dominates within those sustainability KPIs. So incentivization is super, super important, but we have to break it down in order to make it meaningful for people, because otherwise it stays up there, very corporate. How does my day job contribute to delivering that? So what we also have done at the functional level is we've redesigned job descriptions. We've actually shifted our entire finance function from being like CFOs, chief finance officers, to CVOs, chief value officers, recognizing we need to be more holistic about what value actually means beyond the financial to include non-financial. So being very specific and targeted in how we can broaden responsibility and shared accountability for meeting our goals. At the product level, and I think this is where we're doing a lot of work at the moment, we've actually, we developed an eco-design methodology a number of years ago, really focused on emission reduction within the design and conception of our products. What that means is our designers, every time they design or redesign a product, they have to apply a methodology that reduces the emissions impact of that product. And that's been really helpful because it's enabled the business to, particularly in our design and conception and sports business, to really get behind this movement of how we transform our products to be better for the environment. At the moment, we're going through a process of evolving that so that we can be more holistic beyond just emissions to look at other environmental and social impact areas so that we are constantly reducing the product impact. And ultimately, what we want to be able to do is get to a place where we can then communicate with our customers. And Julia's already mentioned this, and this is where organizations like PlanetFWD play an absolutely phenomenally important role. There is so much regulation coming in now for us as businesses. Doesn't matter where you sit in the world, that regulation is going to touch you. And not just for big multinationals like Decathlon, it will include SMEs as well, that we are really required to make sure that the data and information that we use to sell our products and engage our customers is rigorous. So we need this kind of strength of methodologies behind to be able to do that. And we see it, right? We know generationally, Gen Z are increasingly focused on wanting to buy more sustainable products from more sustainable businesses and brands. So there's a lot of focus on that at the moment.
Thank you so much. So we have just a couple of minutes left. I wanted to see if there are any questions from the audience. We might have time for one or two. Middle. Your hand went up first.
Yeah. Hey, thank you guys. guys for speaking to us. We've talked a lot about how it's the responsibility of corporations to engage with their suppliers and collaborate them around information. I want to know what you guys think about what's the responsibility of financially supporting those suppliers, because for a lot of upstream suppliers, they may not be focusing on scope 3 emissions for their companies, like they're focusing on their profit margins, and for them maybe the most sustainable options are the most expensive. So like, what do you see as how you're getting your corporations and your clients to kind of maybe push towards funding those sustainable options for their upstream?
I'm happy to take it. It's a great question. So the role of green finance in upstream supply chain is mega important, but the mechanisms look different in different places. For Decathlon, we have a number of group power purchasing agreements, PPAs, in Asia, particularly in China, where we're using the Decathlon brand to basically convene 14 plus supplier partners from different sectors, different categories, to basically co-finance the development of solar and wind technologies, which will obviously then go back into the grid. In other markets, though, such as India, we find it more challenging, partly because of local capacity on the ground to support, whether it's banks, it's government, whatever it may be. But we are seeing more of it. So we're trying to navigate that space. But it's tricky. But I guess I want to say I acknowledge the point, because we cannot put the burden only on suppliers to deliver solutions that ultimately benefit us. It has to be a collaborative, co-financed job. But we also have to be more creative in how we unlock institutional investment, as well as the role of government support and backing to be able to do that.
One more question. So I'll hand go up here.
Yeah. You can just go. Well, I'll just go. Yeah. Thank you so much for the important work that you're doing. I was wondering, back in 2018, Berkshire Hathaway, which is, I think it still is like the 5th largest corporation in the world, created an executive position on sustainability. And Kathy Willems, she's the woman, and they have summits. And I was just wondering, have you connected PlanetFWD with your data with them, because they own so many companies? And if so, what has been your experience? And if not, be connected with them. And the other question I have, when it comes to generating data, we've been having trouble in Virginia with data centers and being an excuse for the natural gas industry to try and say, oh, you need us because you're processing so much data. So I'm wondering, as you're doing this work, how you're keeping that in mind too when it comes to scope 1, scope 2.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the emissions related to global compute and IT broadly are about 3% of global emissions. But with the growth and proliferation of artificial intelligence, we're expecting that number to increase 15-fold in the next 10 years. And those are conservative estimates. So this is an incredibly important issue. Many LLMs are trained on the entirety of the internet, and they don't all have to be. So there need to be clear guardrails about how we think about training data. There need to be, I think, really almost a Bill of Rights that guides how we apply artificial intelligence within our own companies. So it's an incredibly important issue. I don't think that the world really has a handle on the scope and the pace of how quickly this is accelerating, but it is one of the things that frankly keeps me up at night and that we're focused on. At PlanetFWD, we are very good at guiding our customers in the direction of the greenest computing options. It is something that we think about, and it is why PlanetFWD's practice is very good at scope 3, but it is why our practice covers all of the scopes of emissions for an organization, so that we can help them to be very clear about how their product decisions, their operational decisions really inform their decarbonization strategy, including compute.
Thank you so much. I would like to close on a note of hope. So very quickly, can you each share one thing that is giving you optimism right now?
Yeah, you know what? I've been reflecting on this week. So I'm based in London, and being here at Climate Week is always a joy. I think we're broadening out the conversation, and that gives me hope. It's not just people like me that have been working on sustainability for 20 years, talking to each other. There are some echo chambers still, but this is permeating kind of global social conscience. And that gives me hope, because that is what's going to enable us to really deliver on these big, hairy commitments and tackle these big issues that we're facing. And generationally, seeing such strength in youth movements as well gives me great hope, because we're going to need all the help we can get to deliver on that.
I hope it don't make you blush, Anna, but what's giving me hope are leaders like Anna, open sourcing, eco design, PPOs for suppliers who are doing the right thing, executive remuneration tied to sustainability goals, share price tied to sustainability goals, and on and on and on. When I was at Climate Week last year, maybe only half of the things that Anna's doing within Decathlon were sort of known. And now you're seeing leaders like Anna who are actually using the full force of their beings to lead their organizations forward. And so what makes me really optimistic are the amazing leaders who are working intrapreneurially within these big companies to drive change.
Back at you.
I was going to say, same for you, Julia.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you both for being here. And thank you, more importantly, for all of the work both of you and your companies are doing. As we have heard, tackling Scope 3 emissions is vital for achieving our climate goals, and every employee has a responsibility in these efforts. So I'm pleased to be passing the mic to Sarah for our final session. We are going to be hearing about effective, affordable, employee-centric solutions that can help reduce operational costs while making meaningful impact on Scope 3 emissions. So to introduce Sarah Riedel is the founder of Pathways Consulting. She partners with organizations as a fractional head of people and advisor, focusing on scaling startups from seed stage to IPO readiness, with a special focus on climate tech companies. With over 15 years experience leading people teams in hyper-growth companies, she has managed topics that are top of mind for many organizations: operational effectiveness, high-performing teams, and transformative leadership. She is a trusted advisor to fellow people leaders, founders, and executives. So Sarah, over to you.
Hi, everybody. While everybody's taking a seat, let me get started here. My name is Sarah. I'm the founder at Pathways People Consulting, and I partner with climate tech companies as an advisor and fractional head of people. And I'm excited to introduce our next topic and speakers here. We're going to highlight a couple of solutions that companies can do to reduce their Scope 3 emissions and their operational costs by engaging employees in sustainability activities, ESG initiatives. All right, a very quick history of benefits in the United States. Historically, we've seen really two pillars when it comes to benefits. On the one side, 401k pension, retirement, and on the other side, healthcare benefits. And over the last couple of years, we've really seen that field broaden. We've seen that field broaden because companies are competing for talent. They want to find the best possible talent and give employees the benefits they are looking for. And also because employees have really started to find their voice and are asking for benefits that matter to them. So we have seen that field of benefits increase. We're now seeing really important benefits like mental health care, reproductive care, pet care, but also what we're going to talk about today, green benefits or climate-focused benefits. And the trends we are seeing with employees and with employers are manifold. For employees, a lot of people had the opportunity and are still, even after the pandemic, had the opportunity to work from home in a fully remote environment or in a hybrid environment. they had they had that opportunity, and a lot of people really enjoyed doing that, got a lot out of it. But it also means that their utility costs at home are increasing because they're now spending more time at home. On a personal side, employees care about sustainability on a personal level, and they want to take action in their personal lives, but they also want their companies to take action and support the climate. For employers, they really want to make sure they are on track with their climate goals. They also care about engaging employees in sustainability efforts and really want to engage employees and attract them through their sustainability efforts, making those efforts part of their culture. And they want to do it in a way that's affordable and equitable at the same time. So the good news is that there is a lot of alignment here between employees and employers. And it really means that employees and employers can work together to create these immediate and long-lasting effects for financial and environmental benefits at home and at work. These green benefits are smart, as we said before, for both employees and for companies. And employee benefits and employee engagement strategies that have a climate element drive positive ROI for companies and employees alike. And whether or not climate is a top priority for any individual or for a company, these programs that make the workplace or the home office more efficient just make financial sense for all parties involved. So here are a couple of examples. If a company provides benefits that help employees make their home office or the commute more energy efficient, employees save money on things like utility bills or fuel expenses. And ultimately, that means that companies can reduce employee turnover by offering these benefits that accelerate financial and environmental wellness for their employees. Another example, if you provide sustainable investment options for your employees, you decrease the carbon footprint of their investments and empower them and really help them feel proud of their investments. And we have a third example here. Providing each employee with a foundational climate education means that they really become more mindful of their own resource consumption, which can minimize the company's operational costs and also employees' costs at home. So now I'm excited to introduce our speakers here. Up first, we have Lizzie Kolar, who's the CEO and co-founder at Scope Zero, and she will tell us more about how they're helping enterprises tackle Scope 3 emissions with a carbon savings account.
Great, thank you. And I'll just grab the clicker from you. Hi again. I'm here to talk a little bit more about what we do at Scope Zero. But before I dive in, I always like to start with this question. How many gallons of water do you think the average person in the United States uses just at home, just inside, just in one day? The most common response I get for this question is usually 10 to 12 gallons per person. Let's break it down. So the average person showers for about 8 minutes at a time. The average shower head in the US is 2 gallons per minute. That's 16 gallons just for one shower. Just in one day, the average person is also going to use another 10 gallons for sinks at home, another 13 gallons to flush their toilets, another 11 gallons for washing machines and dishwashers. This totals to about 50 gallons of water per person per day, just at home, just inside. Within 1 year, that's over 18,000 gallons of water. The craziest thing is that just with simple efficiency upgrades at home, this number can easily be cut in half. So you're not just reducing your water consumption by 50%, you're also reducing your water bills by 50%. And this same potential exists for energy consuming devices at home as well. So this potential for savings is why we created what's called the Carbon Savings Account, or CSA. And the CSA is both a financial wellness benefit for employees and a corporate sustainability strategy for companies, because ultimately we provide strong financial incentives for employees to upgrade their home technology and personal transportation, which then reduces a company's work from home and commute emissions. First, just a quick background about myself and my co-founder. My background is in mechanical engineering. I used to design energy and water efficiency upgrades for military base housing all over the US. I met Caitlin in a grad program at Stanford called Sustainable Design and Construction. Her background and expertise is within employee benefits. She used to work for a 401k provider called Guideline. So when we came up with the idea for the carbon savings account, it was truly grounded in our expertise in employee benefits, corporate sustainability, and residential utilities, and how these areas can intersect to create significant impact, both financially and environmentally, both for employees and for companies. So with the carbon savings account, we use a simple and familiar employee benefit framework where you have the employee and the employer both contributing funds to the account. Then the employee uses that money for eligible home technology and personal transportation upgrades that reduce their utility bills, their fuel expenses, and their carbon footprint. With these upgrades, the average home in the US can save over $5,000 per year. Because we so significantly reduce cost of living, that's really where this financial wellness comes in. And then we're simultaneously a corporate sustainability strategy, because the home tech upgrades reduce work from home emissions, the transportation upgrades reduce commute emissions, both of which are part of a company's scope 3 emissions, technically under category 7. Our product is a platform that facilitates the benefit. The fintech side facilitates the cash flow. We have vendors that sell and install CSA eligible upgrades in our marketplace. We surface relevant utility and government incentives. And then through our analytics pillar, we're able to provide create an energy profile of each employee's home to provide customized upgrade recommendations. So it's not just the financial incentive, it's also the logistical help with everything associated with CSA upgrades. To give you an example of what this looks like, here's our employee dashboard. You can see your account balance at the top, a handful of recommended upgrades based on your profile, your lifetime financial and environmental savings from your upgrades. And then similarly, a dashboard built out for employer admins like HR and ESG leaders. So you can see that company-wide impact, and then a breakdown of the enrollment and participation statistics as well. Just to highlight a few metrics of what this actually looks like when it's in action. I'll talk about what we've seen with our New York Life launch. So when New York Life launched the CSA, we hit their maximum enrollment within the first 10 days of launch. Just 3 months into the program, 85% of that cap had used their CSAs to make significant home tech upgrades. We have a net promoter score of over 95. And one of my favorite things about the carbon savings account is how equitable it is in being able to meet every employee where they are with their personal home and transportation setup. We have employees in red states, blue states, urban and rural settings. The age range is young 20s to late 60s. It's renters and homeowners, because the CSA can help you with anything from lighting upgrades to solar and storage to electric vehicles to public transit. Lastly, I just want to talk about why now is the perfect time to offer a carbon savings account. And we can offer a CSA to any size company. We can onboard at any time throughout the year. And if every company in the United States that offers a 401k also offered a CSA to their employees, we could save over $300 billion per year in utility bills and fuel expenses, which would be the environmental equivalent of removing over 125 million cars from the road. So ultimately, the CSA ends up being this low-cost, high-impact solution that drives both financial and environmental wellness. It's effective, equitable, and a timely solution that can drive triple bottom line savings for your company, environmental, social, and financial, because at the end of the day, the CSA can actually reduce your overall spending on your employee benefits package and on your ESG goals. So I'm looking forward to the Q&A once Breen and Anshuman are finished, but thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. And up next, we have Breen Murphy, the president of Carbon Collective Investing, and he's here to talk about the carbon footprint of your 401k.
All right, thank you very much. Lizzie, that was amazing and fast and awesome. Okay, so before I start, one of the things I wanted to ask people is, in this room, who would like to have fossil fuel-free options at your employer? Yeah, okay, that's a lot. So you have a lot of people that want this, right? Who has gone and asked their HR department about this? All right, so we have some people that have done that. What I would also say in this room is this is kind of a unique experience for me, because when I talk to sustainability leaders, I have literally never seen a sustainability leader measure the carbon footprint of the 401k. And so, you know, first disclaimer, we're an investment advisor. Past performance is no guarantee of future. I know that's really boring, but I have to do it. For all those people in the room, you are not alone. There are thousands of Google employees that are writing op-eds to get better options at Google, one of the largest 401ks. You have Stand.Earth is an organization that is trying to get more and more employers to divest in their 401ks. You're getting As You Sow to start to do corporate leverage at large companies to address the climate risk of their 401ks for their employees. So this is something that there's this big active movement, and where no one I've seen is measuring it. And it's a huge footprint. So this is a research report from the CFA Institute. And for every $1 million invested, it is 64 tons of CO2 emitted. And if you have $1 billion invested, that starts to blow out like a lot of what your other emissions are in your plan. So what we talk about at Carbon Collective Investing is we actually don't ask employers to get rid of the passive options. But what we do, and kind of our innovation, is that we have a climate smart option that is eligible to be the default. When you sign up for like a company, a lot of times it can be like, oh, I have this new job. I want to, just log into everything and like go do my work because I'm a little nervous, right? So that default is really important, because when you log in, you might not even make a choice. And so that's what we do. We help people have the freedom to invest, have the freedom to give the right investment options for their employees. And I'm going to get really nerdy here, because this is a nerdy, uncomfortable topic. We get sustainability leaders who are going to like nod and be like, oh, that would be cool. But I ran into the issue. If anybody's asked, they say fiduciary responsibility. And one of the things that we like to say is fiduciary responsibility doesn't say anything about what type of investment philosophy you have to have, right? It says you can have, and often is a good idea to have, multiple investment philosophies. And so what we do then is say, we're going to give you high quality options in 3 different investment philosophies, so that you can have good passive options, wisdom of the crowd. A lot of the bogleheads at your company will want this. ESG options, so that you can, if you want ESG, that can be there. But sometimes ESG still has fossil fuels in them. And you'll look at BlackRock has ESGU and it has Exxon in it. And I know a lot of people, when they go and look at it, they're like, wow, that really sucks. I agree. But you also have climate. And this is basically saying, hey, we all know that it's inevitable. We're going to change away from fossil fuels at some point. Now, whether it's, on time to meet our, temperature goals, I don't know that, but it's going to happen. There's finite resources. So we give people options, which allows the employer, if you have young people or like a lot of people in this audience might comprise your company, it allows you to say, these are our default options, while also providing legal protection so that they don't have to get sued. We are elevating the fiduciary responsibility, because here's the deal. People talk about the fiduciary responsibility of like making sure you have oil in your portfolio, but we've already seen most of the people who've been invested over the last 10, 15 years, coal was a part of that portfolio at one point, and it dropped 99%, and ended up being delisted. And so that is something that you do not want to have happen in your investments. Mitigating risk in your investment portfolio is really, really important. And so one of the things that I like to show really nerdy charts, because these lines are not always that different, and it's basically saying you have these 3 options: passive, ESG, climate, and in different areas, each one performs better. Like there might be different options that perform in different times, right? And it's just this ability to recognize that an investment performance might be different per person. And so if you give your employees the freedom to choose the investments that they want and educate them, it allows them to pick the ones that might be best for their timeline. There's no guarantees, but it allows them to do that. So again, that's our fun light. We put all the options there. And if you have any questions, anyone, a lot of here know me, you can find me on LinkedIn and or email me. So thank you.
Thank you, Green.
And to round us out, we have Anshuman Papna, the co-founder of Terra.do.
Hi, everyone. First of all, plug for what Brain just said. Very happy customer.
Thank you, Anshuman.
Okay, so I run a company called Terra.do. Our mission is very simple, very straightforward, which is to get 100 million people working in climate, which means all of you here, at the very least, if you're not already in climate, you better get to it so that we can get to our goal quicker.
Very simple.
So, we already, I'm assuming this room, actually, I don't want you to look at this slide. I just want you to look at the headline, which is we all know that businesses have this imperative to accelerate climate action. It could be altruistic because they think it's the right thing to do, like Anna here. It could be regulatory because you're being pressured to do that. But regardless, that is pretty clear to a lot of businesses right now. That is exemplified by the fact that 2/3 of all the top 1,000 companies in the world now have science-based targets and so on. So that's all, we all know that. We also know this, right? Which is all of us here are also employees at our respective organizations, and we care deeply about climate action inside our organizations. And in our mind, there are two kinds of people inside us, typical organizations. There is the climate committed, people who are already asking this question on how I could use my skills to achieve the goals that my organization has, and people who are climate curious because they see this around them all the time. What we do is that we help organizations build a sustainability culture. Now, what does that mean? We think it means that you have to upskill your entire workforce. And the three things that you need to do is to first, very importantly, and not to underestimate the value of this, which is to build a common language. What do we mean when we say sustainability or net zero goals? And this has to go from this very light level of kind of a full-scale understanding to an expert level of learning for your specific role. So that common language is very, very important. Second is continuous learning, which is that the space at which climate is moving right now, whether it's technology, policy, et cetera, is just ridiculously fast. And that means that just learning once is not going to keep you updated. You need to be continuously learning on a daily basis, but not just with stuff coming at you, but your entire organization, almost like a peer community that helps you learn on a regular basis. And then it has to connect to your daily work. You need to know that if my organization has a net zero target, what does that mean for my job today? How does that affect my incentives, my OKRs, my goals? So our mission, as I said, is to upskill talent for the green economy. What we do, think of us as a learning platform, think of us as a Coursera for climate, but with a very strong community attached to that. So we run cohort-based learning programs that are taught by some of the top experts in the climate space. And we allow all of these programs and we help all of these programs align to the strategy that the organization has. And we also connect them with a massive pool of experts across the world in each of these different spaces so that there's continuous learning happening. We have a bunch of different offerings in terms of courses. I'll just talk about a couple of them. This is our flagship course called Learning for Action. This is a 12-week-long course, which is pretty intense. And we have a condensed version of this, which is just 4 weeks long. And what this does is that it gives you kind of a holistic perspective of what's happening in climate right now, not just in terms of the science, but also in terms of the frameworks to evaluate solutions, because there are good solutions and there are not so good solutions out there already. Then we have deeper dives into specific skill-based courses. So these are just some example, and I think from the things that Julia and Anna were talking about, some of these would seem relevant right off the bat, right? So we have supply chain decarbonization. What does that even mean for my specific industry, my particular vertical? Climate innovation in corporations. So for example, if I'm trying to figure out how to get the organization to have almost like a innovation, both a risk and an opportunity mindset, what does that even mean? And so on, climate reporting, data and AI, all of these different programs. And I just pulled up one of these programs to show you who teaches these programs and what happens. So Dr. Janice Lau is one of our course creators for the supply chain decarbonization program. She's been a 3 times chief sustainability officer who's actually seen this in reality happening inside these very different organizations. And so it's a very interesting case study-led approach to get people thinking about this. We built a very intuitive learning platform. My own background has been as a tech guy. I used to work at Google. Last I was chief product officer at a $10 billion NASDAQ listed 100 million users company. So I know how to build technology. Fortunately, I have a co-founder who has come from the climate world. She's been teaching for 30 years climate, either at Oxford or to middle schoolers in Hawaii. So we have this very interesting combination of trying to build both technology, but also a very strong human touch in how people truly learn. There's a bunch of interesting stuff that is happening inside the platform itself, but what it does is that it builds a sense of community. And this is the one thing that I'll just kind of leave you with, which is this whole transition that we are trying to do as organizations is actually, in my opinion, a team sport. You have to get everyone together, and everyone has to feel that they're pushing in the same direction. And that sense of community, therefore, is extremely important. We've worked with some amazing organizations like the IFC, part of the World Bank, Dalberg, a development consultancy, and a few others in the audience here right now that I'm very happy to see here. And we've created incredible climate leaders within their organizations. I'll just call out one example of Blair right at the top. He used to be in the product role at Meta and was ready to quit, came to one of our programs, and then therefore went back to Meta, and Meta made him global head of sustainability. So there is that amazing outcome which is happening, which is waiting to happen inside your organizations as well. This is the final. We've graduated about 5,000 people, very high NPS, and the most important thing for us is the last metric, which is we are not Terra.edu, we are Terra.do. So for us, the key metric is what fraction of people are working in climate within 6 months of graduating from the program, and we track that obsessively. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers for sharing these inspiring solutions. I would love to move into a quick Q&A. I hope we do have time for 1 or 2 questions. All right, so what questions do you have for our speakers? Okay, that works too.
On Scope Zero, is it just US-based or global?
So we offer 2 frameworks, a savings account framework and then a reimbursement framework. With the reimbursement framework, we can offer that to any employee globally. And there's a lot of other advantages that come with that framework as well. But yes, we can support a global workforce.
So one, I'm familiar with all of your companies. You're all doing amazing work. So thank you for your leadership in the space. So as probably most of the 100,000 people here this week know, is that greenhouse gas emissions are cumulative, right? And so it's not just about emitting less, but it's actually how do we remove greenhouse gas emissions from the environment. What are you doing through your employee benefit plans or your talent pool training to help make sure more people are focused on the removal efforts, not just the less emissions effort?
I can take that, to be honest. So the question is, so the question from the gentleman here is that GHG emissions are cumulative. They add up over a period of time. So this game is not just about stopping emissions right now. We are far too gone for that. We need to also figure out how to pull these emissions back away from the atmosphere. So what are we doing as companies to nudge people in that direction as well? So for us, it's actually pretty straightforward, which is because we are a climate solutions learning platform. There are a bunch of different programs which are focused on pulling carbon out of the air or reducing, not just reducing GHG emissions, but to sequester them. So we have a program that is run by RMI's, the Rocky Mountain Institute's head on of direct air capture, who is specifically running a program on how to evaluate all kinds of carbon sequestration pathways, whether they are biogenic, where they are chemical, mechanical, and so on and on, or electrochemical for that matter. This program actually just started yesterday, for example, its 5th cohort. And the interesting thing is the kind of people who show up for this. This is not just the typical technology people who are looking to get into this industry and get a job. It's also policymakers. And these policymakers are trying to understand what's real, what's not real here. So that for us, that framing is something that we obsess a lot about. A lot of questions, hands at the back. Maybe, yeah, the gentleman who's the closest to the audience, to the speakers here, if you don't mind.
The one with the nice mustache and the goatee. Okay.
I don't want to say that.
Thank
It
you.
looks good.
Okay.
Appreciate it. I had a question for Lizzie of Scope Zero. In regards to engaging smaller suppliers, how do you successfully engage with them if they're, let's say, from like a unique region like the southeast of the US and they're not used to sustainability or even know what it is? How do you successfully engage with them and have them contribute to your Scope 3 reduction goals?
To make sure I understand the question are you asking how we engage with employees that are using the carbon savings account that live in the Southeast US, for example?
Exactly.
Okay, great. So I'm from West Virginia, which it's a beautiful state, but its main industry is coal, and it's consistently ranked in the top 3 poorest states in the country. So I'll talk about that a little bit because it ultimately heavily influences how we build out the employee experience. So, growing up, a lot of my community members were coal miners that were powering or, risking their health to power the region. But at the same time, they're largely part of the 1/3 of Americans that can't afford their utility bills, let alone the efficiency upgrades that make those bills affordable. And so our goal with the Carbon Savings Account platform is to make any person interested in upgrading their home, even if you don't care about the climate, because we really focus on that financial wellness angle. In addition to the financial wellness piece, the user experience of our platform is so simplified because basically step 1 is the employee gets free money, if you will, from their company to make the upgrades. And then step 2 is we direct the employees to exact products and exact vendors that are going to reduce their utility bills. So when you make things about money, it's a lot easier to make sustainability personal and tangible, which is why we get such a wide range of employees that use the CSA.
Thank you.
All right, and we should have time for one more question. Yes, in the middle.
This is for Lizzie, but also Sabrina, I suppose. Along the way that you get people to care about carbon is by talking via energy efficiency, right, or better returns. What was the sort of thinking and not just calling it an efficiency savings account or a utility savings account, or when it comes to ESG, making the argument that ESG funds perform better instead of making it up carbon and bringing it into this issue that has become so controversial, even though it shouldn't be.
So are you asking about like the naming of the companies?
Yeah. How do you bring in consumers or employees that don't necessarily care about climate, but you can bring them in via this alternative way?
Yeah. I can take that real quick. So because we have experienced this when we initially launched. We launched as Carbon Collective Investing, and we went as an individual we would help any of you if you wanted to help roll over your old 401ks into an existing platform. In that framework, having something that is really aligned with the people here is going to be really valuable, right? Now, what we ended up finding is we had a lot of climate tech co-founders who were part of our initial cohort who were investing, but also wanted at their company, right? And so when they did that, we started to see that more and more companies are happening. And so for us, we rebranded our 401k program. I don't say it here because I don't think you guys are going to care about this like somewhat boring name, but it's the Better Together 401k program. And so what it is about freedom to invest how you would like. And so what we do is we help it provide education in a way that allows them to see whatever option they would like, but hearing the different investment arguments. So, and we repeatedly tell people when we're there and on the 401k, because this is the fiduciary responsibility, is that we are not telling anyone how to invest. We're explaining them their options so they can decide for themselves. And so that's how we've gone through this little pivot in our experience.
All right. Thank you so much for your questions, and another big round of applause for our speakers.
Great. I think we could all probably hang out here for another couple hours talking. I encourage you to hang around for some networking. I think 2 big words from the day are community and action. thank you again so much to this group of amazing presenters and panelists for joining us. Thank you for coming. And we'll stick around here and hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.